says we're going live.
Oh my
And it
gosh.
says that we're live.
Right.
Oh my
That would
gosh.
be really nice. Yeah.
Hello. You guys are live. Breathing
Hi,
on
Megan.
YouTube.
Oh, hi, Megan. Thank you.
Hey. This is the Zombie Knitting Network presents
Aw.
Knitstrips with Karen and Alice. We are so excited to have them here. Yes, it was great kind of chatting with you before we got started. Just want to give the folks out that are joining us live out on YouTube. If you haven't heard of the Zombie Knitting Network, this event is being hosted by the Zombie Knitting Network. Our mission is to promote joy, appreciation, education, and friendship in crafting. We have weekly craft and chat Zooms, as well as live events like this one.
That's happened to me too. If
they
don't do the
does somebody
I
need
guess
to
it's
be
the focus.
muted?
I forget what they call it. There's a thing that they have to get right.
Yeah. Sorry. Fun with Zoom. There we go. We also have a weekly live podcast, watch movies, have movie watch parties, game nights, cast on parties, craft alongs, show and share sessions, and tips and tricks sessions, and also have a lively Discord chat group with KALs and giveaways, where you can show off your latest FO or ask a question or get enabled. So for me personally, ZKN is a great way to stay connected during challenging and busy times. And we have a wonderful community, and we hope that some people come and join us. And thank you for joining us today. So
thanks for having us. Thank you so much.
Yes. Yeah. So again, wanted to give a shout out to Valerie. I'm going to hold the book up here. So I'm going to add myself to the spotlight. But Valerie was the first person in our group that kind of reached out and said, hey, have you heard of this Knitstrips? And I was like, no. And then I was kind of looking for a email address to contact you guys with. And then she was like, and now they're on Instagram. So I dropped into your DMs, and when I shared with Alice and Karen that Valerie, you had kind of been the inspiration, they were like, well, we have to let everybody know because that's awesome.
So nice.
So, yeah. So excited. All right. So I know you ladies from getting to chat with you on Zoom, but maybe folks don't know you here yet. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start. I'm Alice Beltran. I'm one of the co-authors of Knitstrips, and really excited to be here with you guys today. It's so nice of you to have us. This is our first official interview. So there you go.
So excited, and so honored to be the first. So excellent. All right, Karen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen. I'm the other co-author. And I just want to say, Valerie, I heart you so much. And I feel like you get us. You have your background. I don't know if you're a big sci-fi buff, but like Alice and I, we love sci-fi. And I told Megan, I told Alice, I told my, spouse, I'm going to give a shout out to Valerie, and bringing us here. We feel honored. Thank you. Thanks for having us, everyone.
Well, we're so excited to have you. So I'm really interested, in addition to kind of how you guys came to be crafters, how you met each other, because it sounds like, the book wasn't necessarily what brought you together. It was, you guys were friends and then decided to go into this and on this journey together.
Great. Megan, I can take that.
Okay.
Once in a while when Alice and we get to stick our heads up from life and get some air, we say, how did we get here? How are we such good friends? Like, how do we share that one brain cell together? And, we don't really know how we met. I just know that I know that we met at work, just like you, Megan and Amy, you guys met at work. Yeah. But Alice and I, we've been at the same place of work forever. It's like, day one, I was born in Seoul, Korea. Day two, I got on a plane. Day three, I'm working. And day four, my cubicle mate is Alice. Like, that's all I know. Yeah. But I do remember I don't know how even Alice got there, but I would look over at my next cube and there's Alice, and she's always wearing like these really beautiful hand knit scarves, hand knit cowls and ponchos. So that's one real memory that I have.
Mhm.
And just thinking about like how our friendship, I don't even know how we became friends because all I do is work. All I do is have my head down and just work. So I don't even know how like we're here together. But I just remember like one day I had a really maddening day. I mean, just work was coming out of every pore and orifice in my body. I skipped lunch, and I was at a point where I just couldn't do, I was beside myself, and I had a wad of cash, and I grabbed Alice's hand and I said, go, go buy me yarn. Okay. And she came back with this, warm brown bag, full of Noro yarn. She brought me back Noro yarn. And I just want to ask, people here, do you guys have friends when you're stressed out and hungry? Do you have friends who come and bring you Noro yarn? Put it in the chat. Okay. I mean, that sealed the deal for me. Okay. And even till this day, Noro is one of my favorites.
Mhm.
And yeah, and people, we're inseparable at work. I'm not even sure how we still keep our jobs, but we're inseparable. And people think that, they get us mixed up. They call me Alice, they call Alice Karen because we're so alike. But far from truth, we're so opposite. We're so opposite of one another. We're so opposite, we end up being the same. So yeah,
It comes back around, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, like it comes all the way around the planet, and we're completely opposite and also totally identical. And I would see Karen come in, to her cubicle, and she'd have some new knitted or crocheted thing that was totally beautiful. I'd be like, wow, that's so great. Tell me about that. And she was like, oh, I did it last night. I was like, you finished it last night? She was like, well, I started it and finished it last night. I was like, wow, she's intense. I like that. Yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, that was good times. Yeah.
Yeah. So you both were crafters kind of before you were in cubes across from each other.
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. And what would you categorize kind of your knitting adventure? Were you kind of knitters from your earliest memories, or did you become knitters as adults?
Yeah, Alice and I, again, sharing that same one brain cell, we kind of had the same paths, but for me, when I was growing up, my dad would pick up my sister and me after school, and he would drop us off at the local library few days a week after school, with the expectation that we would, march right up to the children's section and get all our homework done, preview work for the next day of school. And when there's time, we're supposed to browse through the academic books in the library. Okay. I read a lot. I learned a lot of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to macrame. I know how to paper mache. I know how to drywall and spackle. I shared a room with my younger sister. Come on, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually, I learned how to crochet and knit. And then in fifth grade, my Aunt Virginia, she taught me how to knit slippers. And those were so fun. I was cranking them out by the mounds, and I wasn't even knitting them in pairs. I was like, this is for a foot or maybe a feet. I was just cranking them out. For all you know, they could be like hot dog warmers, And my other crafting, I was like really seriously into collecting scratch and sniff stickers. I had this like love and hate thing with the pickle, but I collected scratch and sniff stickers too. Yeah.
That's fabulous. I remember not wanting to, but also wanting to. It's kind of like my first have a cake and eat it too moment of like affix them to something or leave them still like on the backing, right?
Yes.
Oh, do I commit? I had anxiety about sticking stickers.
Yeah, and you don't want to scratch too much because you don't want to let the snip go away. It was how do I preserve the snip on the favorite ones? That the balancing that scratch and the snip, yeah.
Yeah. That I feel all of that. And do you guys remember the oily stickers? Those were like, yeah, those like blew my mind. Same thing, Megan. I was like, yeah, put it somewhere, leave it on the paper. Yeah, couldn't handle it. I also learned a lot of my knitting from the library. My mom taught me the basics. I had blue anodized aluminum straight needles, which are so, they're not anything else than what they are. And I had a rainbow variegated yarn that was mostly purple. And I kind of got a laugh out of that. So my mom she tell me the backwards loop cast on, which was just what she remembered, and the knit stitch. And so that was sort of what I started with. And then everything eventually after that, I am self-taught, I figured out through books and stuff.
Mhm.
And about the variegated yarn, there was a line in one of Elizabeth Zimmerman's books where she says, children are fascinated by variegated yarn. And I just, I was a kid even when I read that, and I was like, yeah, that's fair. Like that, it's true.
Mhm.
So I started, as a kid, and I kind of picked it up and put it down throughout childhood. And then when I was a little bit like older kid and I had a little more confidence in, being able to find books on the shelf and whatnot, that's when I started to sort of deepen my knowledge there.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I've been knitting for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like Karen was making slippers. What were you doing with your straight needles and intriguing variegated yarn?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. There were a lot of small squares first that just, I had, doll blanket question mark or
Mhm.
something small. And actually some of those still exist and they go on the Christmas tree, every year. Cause I just sort of packed them away and they come out and I'm like, oh, I made this variegated blue square when I was, 12 or
Hey.
whatever. So there was a lot of that. And I didn't get into like bigger projects. I guess a hat here and there, a scarf here and there, and eventually a ridiculously oversized sweater, which actually you can see a picture of in the book. So yeah, so it was, I again, like Karen's focus and her drive, like, yeah, I didn't quite have that. I would just sort of dabbled around.
Mhm. Mhm. Karen, do you have any of those slippers still around?
We moved several times, but
Yeah.
I don't care what you guys say. I am not a hoarder, but I do have them. And I just want you to know, I still have Zodi's and Beth's catalogs, and I am not a hoarder.
Okay. I will not accuse you of such. I will not accuse you of such. So from knitting to being cube mates and being friends, how then did that progress into Knitstrips? What is kind of the hopefully not tragic backstory? The comic strips often have the superheroes have tragic backstories, but what's the Knitstrip backstory of how that came to be? How did you two decide together we are going to create the world's first comic strip knitting?
Well, okay, so I am a zombie. I watch your show ever since we met, and Megan, I heard you say, I'm gonna ham it up with the whole origin and like, things. So I was like, oh, okay, so I gotta go toe to toe with Megan on this. So like all good, origin stories, let's start from the end. Okay, let's start from the end. Okay.
Flash forward.
Yes, we'll start from the end. Like, how did we get here? Were we just born here? You know, so during the actual development phase of the book, we had our dedicated and talented illustrators, Michelle Phillips and Laura Irgang. They just brought our vision to life. And Alice and I, we grew up loving comic strips. I read Korean comic strips. Oh yeah, I'm Korean, by the way. If you haven't noticed, I'm Korean. I read Korean comic strips. I grew up reading Sundays, comic strips, Children's Digest, and Alice with her, crush on Archie and so so Laura and Michelle, they were able to bring that inspiration of comic books to life for us. And we wanted to make sure that we were able to use that medium to celebrate all the wonderful designers we have today. Some of the pillar designers who have graciously agreed to be participating, and some amazing new designers that's going to keep this craft going. We also, in the spirit of true comic strip stories, we wanted to make sure that each pattern came with a plot, a situational plot in the classic comic strip format. Hearing the thought of the character, with a lot of kapows and zings, because that's what knitting is, a lot of kapows and zings. So that's how it ended, and that's how we just came here. But with that, let's go ahead and rewind and start from the beginning. Okay, Alice, take it.
10 years earlier, 10 years ago. So the actual super long ago, in a galaxy far, far away, 10 years ago. So we live in Southern California, and Los Angeles International Airport was renovating Terminal 1, which is related. And that's a terminal with Southwest in it. So it was a really good terminal. And there was this call for vendors. And I thought, like, the world needs an airport with a knitting store in it, obviously. Like, this is like the best idea in the whole world. And I was thinking about, this sort of airport knitting store concept. And not only would you want to like make the existing knitters happy, but the real key was going to be taking your captive audience in the terminal and converting the non-knitters into knitters, right? Yeah. I know. I still think it's a good idea. And so I was thinking how to do that, like how to make it easy, like a greased slide for someone who's bored and their flight got delayed and the colors are so pretty. And okay, like, a package, an easy package, a one skein project with like an inviting visual format of a recipe for my first thing was mitts, like just the little fingerless mitts that you sew up with a hole for the thumb. Like, that's a terrific beginner project that someone could take on a plane happily on their way. Wind the ball of yarn, get them cast on, and then like off they go, off they fly. So that depended on that kind of visual comic strip thing. And at the same time as this idea was brewing, I had in my meanwhile, I had discovered for myself Len Dayton's Action Cookbook, which, if you haven't heard of, just a super quick summary of that, Len Dayton wrote a spy novel, The Ipcris Files, which was later turned into a movie where Michael Caine was a leading man. I haven't read it. I haven't seen the movie, but he was also a wonderful cook. And he did these comic strip knitting patterns. And can I share my screen, Megan? I want to show one.
Yeah.
Okay?
Let me see. Yes, you should be able to.
I should be able to. I'm going to try right now. Okay. Can you guys see? Can you see that? Someone give me a thumbs up. Yep. There we go. All right. So I had these in my eyeballs, a whole book full of these. So he did these comic strips for a newspaper, and they're just so compelling because he gives you something really iconic, like beef bourguignon or potatoes 4 ways, or whatever it is. And he has these terrific fonts and these adorable, like these super cute illustrations. And I found this to be very, very powerful because the lack of specificity in the instructions and the nature of the drawings were so inviting. I could find myself there, like look, like these potatoes could be anybody's potatoes. They could be my potatoes. You know what I mean? Like flour. It's like, look, and he's even got like a cup. It's not even a cup measure. It's just a cup. It's like, come on in. Like, there's no standing on ceremony here. So I had these in my eyeballs when I was thinking of this concept of how to, make an approachable thing for non-knitters to very quickly convert to knitters. So I'll stop sharing that now. And so then, so I created like the very, very first knit strip in the context of that. Now, obviously, and more's the pity, I do not have an airport knitting store. And that's like, if you want to know about all that, like just talk to me offline. That whole thing's a racket. But that idea and that little pattern was, I liked it too much to just, put it in the folder and put it away. So I sort of plucked up my courage, and Anne and Kay seemed really nice. And so I reached out to them, and happily they were very intrigued. And it was their interest and their willingness to make space on their site. They really sponsored it. They really they got it. And they were like, yes, come on in and do some of those. So I worked with a couple of different and also wonderful illustrators on the web format. You can still get them. They're free over on MDK. So help yourself. And and those were really, really fun. And then the credit for the idea for those being a book actually goes to Shauna Mullen, our publisher at Abrams, who saw the Knitstrips on MDK and then found me on Ravelry. Like how fun, is that? And I get this kind of sort of semi-random. Yeah.
We thought it was spam.
I know, right? I'm like, who is this? I'm like, what?
Director of Abrams. It's spam, Alice. Delete it. It's spam.
I know. It was so fun. And so, my immediate reaction, to that, was like, no way, that's way too much work. I was like, maybe if Karen will do it with me. So I think, and Karen thought it sounded like way too much work too, because we've got these jobs that, we've been just like, in our families and whatnot. So I think Karen, didn't I tried to like ease you into it a little. I'm like, well, how about if you're just, maybe you could like be like the creative director or something, just some role in it. And you were like, oh, okay. And then like once you were in, it was like a black hole, you're like, you're past the horizon. Now you can't go out. You can't leave anymore.
There's no turning back.
There was no turning back. So there we were, like total partners in crime on it. And in the ongoing dialogue of like, between Karen and I, and because we still had to write a proposal for the book, even though the publisher was like, oh, you should do this. It wasn't, we still had to like go through all the steps. And in the course of doing that, one of the things we did is we kind of unpacked a little bit why that format, that visual format that Len Dayton used for his action cook strips, and that I used for the early knit strips, like, what was it about that? And right beneath the surface of that lives interactive knitting, like, you know what I mean? Like, and they sort of evolved together a little bit stepwise, but this was about the origin story. So yeah, that was it. It's been like kind of 10 years, more than that now, 10 years in the making or so. Yeah.
Wow, that is quite a journey. And also just the people along the way that maybe this publisher thought it was just going to go like into a black hole, right? Like, oh, I'll reach out, but maybe this is just a lead, or kind of your thought process behind the airport. If that hadn't happened, right, would have the dominoes kind of fallen into place to make all of that happen. Or if Karen hadn't been a cube mate and best friend, right?
That's right. Yeah, because or if she had just it wasn't going to happen without her on board. It would like totally took the two of us. Yeah.
So do you, I love your backgrounds, absolutely love your backgrounds. Was there a specific reasoning behind the cookies with yours, Alice? Are you a culinary person? And I love Karen's kapow. I kind of see the inspiration.
Yeah, these are actually snipped from the book. So these are from the book. And of course, these are my IK cookies. Which was a recipe that we put in the book. They're sort of an interactive cookie that you can put whatever you want in. And I seriously just had some for breakfast. So yeah, they're like one of my favorite foods in the whole world. So yeah, just for fun. Yeah, just for fun.
And Karen, your kapow?
Yeah, I put the kapow because I'm shy. To like balance me out. Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm having a little more problem with that, but maybe the kapow is bringing out your super non-shy side, your extrovert side. Well, that's awesome. So can you tell me a little bit more about that interactive knitting? Again, I can hold up the page here I think that you were mentioning your first sweater.
That's it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the one. Yeah,
Yep.
gauge, smage, like no, right? Yeah.
And
Although,
then, yeah, it flipped on my screen, but I found this very powerful quote that really kind of hits at the heart of the IK. So in IK knitting, gauge follows fabric, fabric doesn't follow gauge.
yeah.
So
Okay,
yeah,
so
it's in a little.
yeah, that's a big kapow. That there's a
Yeah.
lot there. So there's all sorts of questions in there. So Karen, I'm going to start with a piece of the IK knitting, and I guess to kind of to really answer that, if it's okay, I'm going to go back a little more origin story-ish stuff.
Yeah, go
and,
for it.
and say a couple things about like why and like where from and all that. So when I was a kid, and so I had the basics down, and I was going to the library and I was trying to figure stuff out. I realized very early on that that most of the roads available, were ones that I could not take. So let me explain. So I'll use a very beautiful book that was around at that time called Knitting in America by the wonderful Melanie Fallick, which some of you might know or have heard of. It was gorgeous, a big, thick, heavy book with beautiful photos of interesting and exciting things from all sorts of different places, and I had never seen anything like it back in whatever it was, 96, or subsequently whenever I came upon it. And turned to, I'm like, great, like I'm a knitter, I'm gonna, great. And I turned to the instructions and just like just bam, like right into a glass wall between me and these instructions. Not because they were cryptic, because of course all of our abbreviations are somewhat cryptic. And I understood the abbreviations, not because of that, but it was that that hyper ultra, that specificity of, like just like one line at a time, line by line instructions, right? And just a solid page of them. And at first I was like, oh, I can't, I keep bouncing off the page. Maybe if I just try harder. So I start, bounce off the page, and then like the harder I tried, like the more irritated I got. I mean, the more I felt bossed around by the pattern, and I would just end up muttering like, stop telling me what to do. I know what I want. Stop telling me what to do. And that's just my subjective, this is my brain. I know, many people, knit happily and well from line by line patterns, and that's I'm in awe. But I found that I couldn't. And so that was a little bit of a setback for me. But happily, around that same time, I found another book, a very skinny book with one of those real funny anonymous bindings that the library does, where like there's no cover, it's just navy, that material, and it's just got a call number on it. I was like, well, this is skinny, how bad could it be? And so I picked it out, and it was Knitting Without Tears by Elizabeth Zimmerman. Yeah. And that was a bit of a, not a bit, that was a knitting line, a lifeline, right? Because I was like, oh, thank goodness. Okay, someone is talking to me in a way that I can understand, that my brain can take in. Because I understand now, I'm a bit of a big picture person. Like I need to understand how the sense of the whole thing. I need the gestalt of the whole thing. I don't care like how wide the sleeve is, how deep the armhole is, whatever. Those are details that you'll work out later. Like, or they'll be what they'll be, and that's fine. But I need to understand, like, I can't just take like a teeny inch at a time and just keep doing that over and over, and like with sort of faith in the end or whatever. Like I kind of got to start with that big picture and go from there. So her approach did that. So Elizabeth Zimmerman, Barbara Walker, these were, giants in this field, and people who, were some of these earliest advocates of sort of like, you're the boss of your knitting, like this approach that did kind of come from that different place. So that kept me in the game. And that let me, keep knitting and let me do that. I should pause, Karen, I'm sort of backing up to sort of talk about, where this comes from our knitting styles. Do you want to chime in with yours, like with,
Oh yeah. Yeah, it for me, one, just for me, like I'm too cheap to go buy knitting books. And two, I haven't really had a chance. I've begun during this book project to really just understand why I knit the way I do. But for me, basically, I equate it to multitasking. I cannot multitask. There was a time, maybe like what, 10, 15 years ago, it was like very in vogue to be like a hot, multitasker. I embraced it early on to say like, I can't multitask to save my life. And it's pretty extreme. Like, for example, I can't talk and click a mouse at the same time. That's why, like, we promised, like Megan and Alice and I, we promised like to log on at a certain time. But like, I realized my child was coming and saying to me, I was like, respond first and click Zoom, or what do I do? Huh? So I was late. And then like another extreme version of me, I really can't multitask. Please don't offer me like minestrone vegetable soup. I can't eat solids and liquids at the same time. Like, what do I do? Do I like, so like,
Jus do I drink? I don't know.
Just give me jus. Let me just drink the jus and then give me a bowl of salad. I don't know. Like, I can't multitask. So I equate that to line by line knitting, because I know how to knit and I know how to read, but please don't ask me to do both simultaneously. People who don't believe in UFOs, come to my house. If I had to do line by line knitting, you would see all the UFOs you would need to see. Okay, that's all you would have. Okay, all right. Okay, that Roswell is happening here in SoCal. I cannot do it. But with that said, if you look at my Ravelry account, I love those patterns. And I collect them like my favorite stash, patterns, like the colorwork patterns, Isabel Kramer, like I love them. I collect Rowan, pattern books. There's a place, and I'm going to evolve, I will transcend. But for now, instinctively, and also because I'm impatient, I figured by the time I process the line by line knitting information, understand it, and cast on, if I didn't do that, and if I just knit the way I do, I'm pretty much done with 2 or 3 sweaters by the time I got through reading the pattern and understanding it. So I'm very impatient. And at the end of the day, I think everything's a square. Even circles are squares. They're a bunch of just 4-sided shapes that just come together. Like a slipper can become, if I just keep knitting up, it's going to become leggings, and just sew up the seam, So for me, it's like, how hard can it be? It's not like it's brain surgery. And I just kind of like dive in. It's my mentality. Yeah.
I love that you both came at it from totally different angles, but love it, you love you love that type of knitting, but came at it from very different angles. Again, kind of seems kind of par for the course for for the story of you. Karen, I can relate to the being a cheapskate, and sometimes I'll look at patterns and be like, I can figure that out. I don't need to tell them to tell me how to do it. And I can also, Alice, relate to like you're not the boss of me. Don't tell me how deep my arm should be. Like, I know that. Like, don't tell me that.
You're right. Stop telling me what to do. I'll buy the books because I love the inspiration, but I won't knit like that one. I'll redesign it, right? I'll be like, great, okay, I can do that, and then I'll go and redesign it. But so Megan, so like again, like we're totally opposite, but exactly the same. So we both come at this from this place of being like, I don't know, like just needing a different avenue, for knitting. And so IK, right? And so you had asked, what is it? So that's where we come. That's sort of our trajectory into it. And what it is, I'm so excited to get to say what it is. At the center of it, interactive knitting is a celebration of the knitter's point of view, right? Because you matter and your point of view matters, and the world will be enriched by seeing your point of view. And so an IK pattern is, its purpose is to create a space for that to happen, sort of like a sandbox or something, right? It's like Len Dayton's beef bourguignon. It's like it's a thing, it's a specific thing, but it's going to be your own, because the point is for yourself to emerge through it, so that's, it's all about the knitter's beautiful creative mind, and that's kind of what IK is. Karen, did I forget anything about IK?
No. But I think you didn't forget, but we almost forgot, Alice. We had a Home Alone movie moment during the development of the book, because that scene in the movie where the mom, realizes that she forgot her child at home
on the plane.
Yeah. Well, are you talking about Home Alone 1 or Home Alone 2? Because there's like 9 of them now. But anyway,
it doesn't matter.
Kevin! That's all I'm remembering.
Yes, but Megan, Alice and I, we didn't cry Kevin because we don't know Kevin's. Instead, we cried Gage. Because during the development of the book, our mantra was, what was the gauge? Well, what gauge are you working on? What was the gauge? It wasn't what yarn are you using? It was always coming back to me. So this was something very inherent in our knitting, in putting it out to words in the book, and we actually almost forgot, and then we realized, gauge, we need to devote a section in the book that calls it out. So trying to put words down on paper that's something very intuitive and inherent was like a really fun challenge. Like, for example, how do we say for decreasing or working, we don't tell them how many stitch counts or how many rows. How do we say, like, check your gauge? So it really changes the language.
Yeah, totally, Karen. And like building on that, those challenges, and I'm really glad, Megan, you called out that, gauge follows fabric doesn't follow gauge, because that's like so primary to the whole thing. Because like what Karen was saying, the IK pattern, it has to provide enough structure so that the knitter can execute it. But because it leaves the freedom for size and proportion and yarn and gauge, like there are no stitch counts or row counts, like we have no way of knowing, right? And so essentially an IK pattern has to work for everyone with every yarn, which is a bit of a tall order. And it's really fun to think about the structure or a garment or an item in that way, and to find a way to get there with those things being variable. And we had a great time doing it, but it is really challenging. And as kind of a subset of that, like, challenge is specifically that visual conveyance of information. There are, some panels more than others are what we call infographics, which is where you not only have a technically correct illustration, but you also have like layers and layers and layers of additional things like smushed down onto it. You've got the little written instructions. Then you have info bubbles that give you additional information. Maybe you've got arrows that either show movement or just point to something. You've got something like kind of glowy and sparkly to like point out, hey, this is what you're looking at. Even the kapows and the dialogue give you a little context for, sort of what the situation is or what's happening, if it's like an eek moment or if it's like a, whatever it is. So, those pieces, they can be, visually, they can be busy. And and people will say, oh, it's a little busy. And I'm like, yes, it is busy. It's busy doing a job. It's busy trying to give you information. But it's just a different, again, it's just a different way to look at it. And our illustrators, our amazing illustrators, I'm pretty sure they worked their fingers to the bone, to get those infographics right for us. So those were some big challenges.
But I think that people that can figure out how to make take very dense amounts of data and make them extremely understandable are like wizards, right? I mean, I think I shared with you when we met that genomics is my day job, and we're talking about millions and billions of base pairs that we're trying to display meaningfully for our customers in some instances, right? And so we've got people that specialize in user experience and user interfaces, right? So you've found some illustrators that are doing that within your book in the knitting world, right? Very dense amount of information in a small little comic strip box.
That's right. That's a tall order. Yeah, you totally get it. And it's so critical, that part, like, I would love to just spend a minute on that. Like, gauge follows fabric. Like fabric is not a derivative of some gauge. Like the gauge is just a data point that is coincident with a fabric that is the fabric you want. And so I want to unpack that a little, because it's so tied to the whole IK concept. And it's very important. If you want to give that much creative control to knitters, they must control the fabric, right? I mean, that's, because it's the fabric that is either, that's right, it's either fluffy and light, or it's drapey and silky. The fabric might be chewy, it might be squishy, it might wear like iron for 3 generations, right? So and sort of fortunately for us, like, we are literally in a golden age of yarn. If you like yarn, you just be grateful that you were born now, because this is a fantastic time to be alive if you love yarn. Think about it. Like, never before in the history of the entire world have we ever had so much good yarn. You can get yourself a little bit of hand spun. You've got breed specific stuff. You've got people who are building yarns from flocks that they have relationships with. And even the big box stores and the commercial folks, they're making better yarn than ever before. You know what I mean? Like, and that's like, Karen and I have seen some of that big box stuff come a long way. I mean, it went from, the plasticky stuff to stuff now that, sure looks nice when you knit it up, so there's some really nice stuff along the whole spectrum. So you have a ton of choice, right? The knitters have a ton of choice, and IK wants to preserve that choice for the knitters going into projects, because you know what you want. You have a vision, right? And like, we want to make space for what you want to come out of it. So you need control of the fabric, because that drives pretty much the whole thing. And it's really fun to think about that, about saying, so you've got the vision, and the vision says, well, okay, then the fabric is like this. And then once you say, okay, well, the fabric's like this, and it has these qualities, you think to yourself, well, what yarn do I need? Like, with what qualities, with what qualities to give me that fabric, right? And so hence, like, the yarn selection. And I wouldn't presume, I would never presume to tell you, do it with this yarn at this gauge. You know what I mean? Because, like, there's so much choice. Like, you could do it any which way, and you know what you want, and you should do it. And incidentally, it works the other way too, which is one of my favoriteest things to do. I could kill hours either with my own stash or in a yarn store, picking up skeins, because you can think about it in the forward way too. You look at the skein and you consider the qualities of it. You look at the twist and feel it and the color and all of it, and you think to yourself, what kind of fabric can this make? It could, you could probably, there's like probably a big, like some sort of range of fabric it could make, but it's got finite limits around it, right? Like, a certain yarn it's only going to do so many things, right? And so then you think, well, it'll make fabrics that go from here to here to here. It would make any of these fabrics, which of those fabrics are, or would be useful to me or are interesting to me that for something that I want to do. So that's why, gauge follows fabric. Like, the fabric is the end all be all, and then I measure it. I don't know what the gauge is. Whatever it is, it is. I don't want to say I don't care what it is, because obviously I care, but like, it's just an incidental fact of the more important thing, which is, this vision that the knitter has. So obviously, like, I love talking about that. I could go on and on and on. I'm sorry, but that's
that presumptuousness is something that I hadn't really thought about until, again, I feel like you said this earlier as well, and I'm going to repeat it back because I feel like it's something that really hit me. That saying something that kind of is intuitive, but like how to describe that to describe that kind of intuitiveness, right? So very presumptuous that they would be able to pick not only the yarn, but the gauge that would make you happy. And then, yeah, you've got a little bubble in here on your page about kind of talking about the properties that says, remember, you are swatching to get a fabric that pleases you for your project. And I was like, yes,
That's right.
Like I am the consumer of this. I am the one making it. I am the one making the choices, right? Yeah.
Right. And I feel like, you know, the landscape has been kind of dominated by this other approach, which is it makes the knitter shop for it at the end. Like, you know, you kind of end up looking at, you know, sweaters or garments and, you know, trying to shop for that vision of yours in something finished, when it makes so much more sense to my brain to pull that all the way back to the yarn. You know what I mean? Like start there so that you can really, I love getting what I want. I love iterating to get what I want. You know, I love iteration, and it's very satisfying, you know, that sort of, because there's a self-exploration there too, right? Which I think is I think is terrific and healthy to you know, to try those things out. So yeah, making space for that. And that's why the page you showed, when Karen and I were like, Kate, because we realized, we're like, you know, we've got to provide a vocabulary, because we're using a vocabulary. And so we need to put this, like, it's all a glossary, right? So when we say, you know, because I ain't going to be talking in stitches per inch. I'm going to say, well, it's like really drapey, or it's like really chewy, or it's like, you know what I mean? These more descriptive terms for fabric. And these are really tip of the iceberg. I mean, you know, when you get into it, like, you know, there's so many aspects that, of course, we didn't, I don't want to say we didn't have room, but like, it was just sort of like, this was like the first layer of paint of like this density of fabric. And then you could subsequently, we could have a good time, like talking about like fibers, and, you know, and Karen, you have a lot of experience with, you know, fibers and scouring.
Our publisher said, girls, there's a page limit. Scale it back, girls. Yeah.
Right.
Come back. Yeah.
So we had limits too, but me.
So did you have an opposite way of getting to some of this gauge stuff, or do you kind of share that with Alice? In that, I mean, it seems like you guys, again, opposites, but end up in the same spot. So
yeah,
just curious, Karen.
I'm a manic knitter. I'm a chain knitter. You know, like I don't, you know, I'll knit plastic bags. You know, I'll knit dental floss. Like, I just need a knit, you know? So, you know, if you tell me to knit a whole bunch of gauges, I'm in my happy place. And you know what's so fun is like the thrifty, cheap Karen is like, well, if I knit with big yarn, I'm going to really maximize on yardage here, you know, but then like, that's not the kind of sweater I'm going for, you know? So it was really fun, you know, like there's, and you know, Alice and I, we have very different gauges. Like I happen to be a very standard knitter, so whatever it says on the yarn ribbon, I tend to, you know, fall within that. But even with that, like, again, Alice and I, we like to get, you know, very molecular. But even with that, I'm like, oh, with these needles, I actually get a different gauge than these needles, you know, and not just size needles, but even the brand of needles. So it's like, and then, you know, gauge and the art of blocking and really just having that control of like, and it's so satisfying. It's really satisfying to have understanding of and ownership to how this, you know, how this got here on me. You know, it wasn't by accident, you know, at the end of the product, like, oh, it fits. You know, no, it's like, yeah, you're mine. For 9 months in the womb, and out you came, and you're mine. You're beautifully made. Yeah.
Yeah. And Karen, what you said makes me think, like, you just said something that I wanted to like blow up a little, which is that it's so, for me, it is so much more satisfying to knit a swatch when the question at the end of the swatch is, do I like it? As opposed to the question, is it 4.5 stitches per inch, or is it 5? Is it 4? Is it this? That's just like, that's not making me happy, or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't enjoy that line of questioning. I'm very comfortable with, do I like it or do I not? You know, that's something that I can do all day long. So
Yeah.
yeah, a happy swatching to me, it's like it really changed swatching because it was always very a very aversive experience, right? I'm from a from a behavioralism point of view, like you do it and it would be so punishing. You'd be off by a little, and whether you liked it or not, whether you said, well, I kind of like this fabric the way it is, but it didn't matter what you liked. It wasn't the right gauge or whatever. So yeah, can't do it. So yeah,
no, and I feel like, again, you guys have definitely pulled out this thing that's kind of been lingering in the back of my mind, right? So like you'll teach, I've taught sock classes, right? And people are like, well, what's the gauge should socks be? Like, what's the magic gauge? And, I'm like, well, in general, if you hold it up to the light and you can't see light through it, then that's going to be a nice, like you're saying, firm fabric that's going to be getting friction with the ground, right? So whatever, whether it's fingering weight, whether it's worsted, whatever, you want to get a fabric that isn't airy, right? Isn't your airy on your diagram here. Similarly, I love doing color work sweaters, but a lot of them are in DK weight. And so I've found that I get really warm when I wear DK weight sweaters, right? So I've just been willy-nilly deciding I'm going to do it in fingering, right? And can kind of get the fabric that I want with fingering, but still follow the color work charts and whatever, right? So again, kind of owning the fabric that you want versus I have to get this specific stitch per gauge.
Yes, and Megan, I feel like and you're an experienced and I think say courageous knitter, because you'll take like a traditional line by line pattern and and do that. But I feel like I would much rather do that with a pattern that's designed to let me do that than try to fix one that you know what I'm saying. It's like I feel like there's a little better chance for success. I mean, of course, there's still iteration and experimentation and all that, but like, so I wanted to make a space where you're not being deviant, you're not deviating. You're like, this is how it's supposed to work, right? Yeah.
I don't know. Again, I need to choose one of the many fabulous patterns in the book here that I want to get to chatting about as well. To really kind of be like, is part of it the rebellious spirit within me that I'm like, well, if I'm following the pattern, maybe then it won't be.
Right.
But I could see where, I think you kind of touched on it. It would be challenging you're bucking this way that everybody's kind of been indoctrinated into knitting, but also you've gotten these wonderful, fabulous designers to kind of jump in and dip their toe into what is not their normal way of writing patterns. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Was that challenging, or did they kind of jump all in like I'm getting excited about it?
Right. Well, Karen, you want to go?
Thankfully, the reception to the invitation was overwhelming. They're so gracious. And it was definitely something, they all came back. The common theme was, this is so different. This is so different on so many levels. Hey, Megan, I just want to do a quick time check. Are we good?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you guys have got time, we could just keep chatting.
Oh, this is day 5. Alice and Karen were just born here. We could just keep going. Yeah. So the on so many levels, the designers were like, this is so different. Different in terms of the medium where the patterns are going to be, different in terms of like how the patterns are going to be non-line by line. So it was an iterative process, and I think it was a journey for all of us. Yeah.
And I would everything you said, Karen, and just said, it was also very nice. They were very gracious, very patient, because this book, frankly, took a little longer than we might have planned for, but it finally emerged. Yeah, and we were so glad to have all those designers on board. They're fantastic.
Excellent. Yeah. So again, I think I've mentioned it on the podcast, but there isn't a single like normal photography photograph within this book, right? It's all illustration.
That's right.
Which again it's a really interesting medium to show things close up, right? Where sometimes I know I've tried to take pictures for like tutorials and stuff, right? Like when you have that control, I could see where it could be a little frustrating, but also really empowering, because you can put the detail on the things that you want to really highlight within
Yes.
the photo, the illustration.
Yeah, and Megan, I would offer like small aside anecdote. Like every so often in this long process of making this book, somebody somewhere would be like, so there's no photos? Were you sure about, maybe did you want to just like we could put the photos? And I would just, but Karen and I were like, no, like no photos, that'll ruin it. Like,
Yeah.
no.
That would be a disservice. That
would
would
be a
be a disservice to the knitters that we want to, support and encourage,
Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
and I've thought this sort of granular more about that visual format, but like a photograph can be oppressive, right? Because it's like a photo likeness, right? Like it's sort of almost, there's this implied sense of like, well, this is how it should be. It should look exactly like this photo, right? But an illustration, like Len Dayton showed us with his butter and onions and cheese grater, it's like an illustration, you already have to imagine what the thing is one more step than if it's a photo. And once you're already doing that, you're already like lending your imagination to make the drawing, like know what it is in your head. It's much easier to start projecting your own vision onto it, which is exactly what we want to like kind of entice and tease out of people, right? Because I don't want people to see a photo and be like, oh, well, it looks like that, and I may or may not like what that is. I want people to see a drawing and already be on that good slippery slope of like, oh, I like that. Well, I would do it in blue, or I would do it in, you know what I mean? It's like, just to get that going. So that is, that was super important for us. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, in my mind, it's probably, some of the folks, I'm trying to take it from comic book again into like real life, right? Like they have gotten upset about some of the director's choices in like the Marvel comic books movies, right? Like the director chose this, but in the comic, this is what like my mind, took what was on the page and created. And like, that's not how it was supposed to look or be, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, again, it's so much more cerebral. You guys, again, you're blowing my mind. It's so much more cerebral than just like, oh, well, this was kind of a fun format, right? Like I really love all of the very intentional things that you've put into this book to kind of, again, get imaginations going and get people really owning their crafting, like this is, I'm going to make this mine. I just love that so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Megan, when we were practicing, you had asked like bring samples because the viewers love it, and we're like, and to satisfy and oblige you, I'm wearing the Darcy, and that's all you're going to get out of me.
That's all you're going to see today.
That's all you're going to get, and you can get this pattern for free right now at MDK if you'd like. But like, it's all about the drape. I'm not nowhere as handsome as a model in the book.
Who's her husband?
It's my spouse. Yes. So, but we try to convey. Use whatever yarn you want. I think maybe Alice even gifted me with this. It's Shabui. She probably starved her family for a week. To get this skein for me. But like I made it, and I love the way it billows. It's very effortless and chic, and it's just simple way of just folding it, and so you could do color work on it if you like, but we just give you the general guidelines so you could look as dashing as Darcy. Yes.
There. And look, see, that's fair, right? Look at hers in real life and look at the one he's wearing. Like, it's fine.
Yes. So
yeah, thank you, Megan. And yeah, Karen, I could wax poetic about that, though. That's one of Karen's patterns, which again, I love Karen because like just with that simple use of a bias fabric, do you know what I mean? It's just garter stitch, right? So it's like, that's a terrific beginners. It's so accessible, but when you just by putting it on the bias, suddenly the fabric performs and behaves and does work in a different way, which I
Mhm.
love. Yeah. Yeah. I like to think secretly, Megan, like that the book is like, it's like a revolution that's like kind of hiding behind like layers of, like comic-y kapow, no, woo, but underneath
Yeah.
that there's like a revolution in the offing there. So
Mhm. Mhm.
maybe that's maybe
Yeah.
hubris.
Well, again, I would be remiss to not mention that you kind of have 4 issues, right,
Yeah.
within the book. So there's the just one more,
Drum.
Jam. Yeah.
which is just fun to say, right?
Yeah, drum.
Okay. And what's the concept behind Jam?
Oh, so it's just like, again, because I'm a chain knitter, and my children or my boss or my dogs are like, come on, Karen, we gotta, or don't forget, Karen, you got it. And I'm like, one more, just one more row, one more, just one more minute, one more, so that's where Amjam is. One more, just one more. Okay, it's 2 a.m. but just one more hour, I can get it done. Just anything Amjam. It's just Amjam. Yeah.
One more cookie.
Reach out, like with Alice saying that you would show up and you just finished something.
That's what I'm talking about. That's exactly it. She would Amjam her way like through, some Pride and Prejudice marathon, on PBS, and just like come in with like a thing. Yeah. And yeah, I love it.
Amjam.
One more. Yeah.
Just one more.
And then, the next one is Focus Pocus. So what's that one about?
That one is, it's a little extra effort and you're going to have to pay attention, but it's worth it because it's like magic at the end, right? So that's where we put the things that, like, look, are frankly, like, you're not going to be in the mood to knit those all the time. Like, I know that, right? Because I'm not. Most of it's job knitting, right? But sometimes you just get the bit between your teeth and you're just like, I have got this skein of variegated yarn and I'm going to intentionally pool that stuff. You know what I mean? Or whatever it is that you want to do. And so it's stuff that is a little more technically challenging.
Yeah. But again, kind of, I can get addicted to that magical feeling, right? Like,
yeah.
I am making magic, right? Like turning heels, maybe not the best thing to be doing, like if you need to be able to focus, right? To be able to do, or you don't have time to focus. But like at the end, I am like, behold, there is a bend in my knitting, right? Like,
yeah, that's a good example. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And then the next one is STASH, which is an acronym that I feel like maybe was backronymed, but is also a really cool concept.
Yeah. Karen, you want to talk to STASH?
Oh yeah, STASH, that's our common language, isn't it? Okay. Yeah. You cannot be a Zombie Knitting Network member if you don't have a stash.
And can I just say, Karen, I see some impressive stash behind some of these really nice people.
I'm like, Vicky, can I be there?
I know.
Like,
I know.
Oh my gosh. Like,
I'm like looking.
Okay. Yeah.
Really nice. I see Tupperware bin. I'm like, I'm loving it.
Yeah. It's yeah. I'm drooling. I'm swooning. Yeah. It's pretty awesome. Yeah. So, stash and we're hoping that the readers could get a feel for, again, because Alice and I, we're so different. Her stash looks very different than my stash, and I'm sure everyone else would fall somewhere or around those two extremes. And just work with what you got. Just work with what you got, because in the IK way, stash works. You don't have to go out and buy more. Again, like cheap Karen, I'm gonna make it work with what I got, and I got a lot.
Yeah. Well, they're also kind of those yarn treasures, right? That you've like
yes,
and will eternally be in your stash if you don't pick them up and say, no, I'm going to find a project to make something with this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And then the last one is bucket list. What's bucket list?
The bucket list. That's the stuff that is kind of aspirational, and and that can be very different for everybody. So we picked what we picked, but anything can be on anybody's bucket list. It's not prescriptive. So yeah, we chose things that have sort of like a big momentous feel for like the first time you do them, like turning a heel. Like socks is kind of a big deal when you make your first pair of socks. Some people only knit socks and they knit a bajillion, and that's great, but for a lot of people that's a thing. Lace
Mhm.
can be a thing, you know, a little intimidating, a little off-putting, but maybe an easy, you know, entree into that. And things
Mhm.
like, yeah, so things like that, that have that kind of big feel, that you feel like you're a little bit of a different knitter after you've knit them. After you've knit them, you're like, well, I'm changed now. Yeah.
Yeah, we heard Amy mentioning yarn bombing, the
Yeah.
yarn truck, you
Zip
know.
ties, so smart.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's in there as a bucket list, you know.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yes, yeah. I think again, kind of looking through some of the, and I'll just mention it briefly, some of the patterns. I think the Wow by Jeanette Sloan is probably the one that I'm like, okay, I can pick 2 yarn treasures out of my stash and
Yeah.
really just because it'll make the yarn sing. So I think that's going to be my first foray
Awesome.
into IK knitting that wasn't kind of me, like you said, jumping in and doing it myself.
Right. And Megan, do you already know how to do 2-color brioche, or will you be using the
Does.
tutorial?
She does.
Oh, she
I
does.
do.
They
Oh, you
recently
did a
had a
thing.
brioche knit along.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Then
So I
okay,
was
then
thinking
you'll
of
be.
you, Megan, and I was thinking of the cow.
Aaron's like dropping like, yeah, I did watch, and they did have a brioche.
They just finished the brioche knit along, and so I was thinking, oh yeah, Megan could do the.
But I like the juxtaposition of like the using both sides, right? You don't have to literally
Fun.
wear the sweater inside out, because I just finished an inside out, or a sweater that could be worn inside out. You can use both, you know, you're getting both sides of the pretty brioche and different directions too. So
Yeah. I love that pattern that Jeanette came up with. So nice.
yeah. Yes, and love the representation too, right? Gotta shout out for that. All kinds of people of different genders, races, ages.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
Thank you. Yeah, and that was really, obviously, is like really important to us and to everybody. You know, for it to be that way, because the knitting community, you know, is, you know what I mean? Like, we really wanted it to be like a mirror to, like, you know, what's happening. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then yep, the cookies, the IK cookies.
So good.
So good. All right. Well, I could chat with you all day, as is apparent. I did want to mention, I had seen a comment. Sarah out on YouTube said that she was a college friend of Larissa's. That must resonate with one of you too. And she told me about your book, Karen. Although I'm not a knitter myself, I work at a STEM school and added your book to our library because I love that you incorporated a graphic novel that's an easily accessible how-to book. So full circle moment, somebody is going to see your book in a library and maybe decide to start knitting, right?
So Megan, I'm sorry, may I ask who put that in the chat?
It was Sarah Peters is the name.
Sarah, thank you very much. Larissa, she's my sister-in-law.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
your sister-in-law, and yeah, she's an amazing woman. So thank you, Sarah, for that shout out. Thank you. It's wonderful to meet you.
Yeah, so great to hear that your book is going to be in a library that somebody might stumble upon and start crafting, just like you guys did, right?
That's my only and my dearest hope. Like, you know, if there's like, I kind of, in a lot of ways, the book is sort of like for my, like, you know, 12-year-old self, you know what I mean? So if man, I would be so happy. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and if anybody else wants to drop a question in the chat, we can definitely share. I also see that Lynn says that the depth of idea agrees with me. The depth of ideas in this book are incredible, and that she got the book and is looking forward to diving in. I know that Lynn does a lot of kind of interactive knitting and adjusting on her stuff too. So
nice, a kindred spirit.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I would love Q&A. I love talking to knitters about knitting.
Yeah.
So if anybody's got anything, for sure. If not,
I know I didn't ask all of the questions.
I think you did.
Feel free to type them in or to just to chime in.
Is there anything else, Karen, that while people are considering that and doing that, is there anything else that we forgot to say or we should say? I feel like we said a lot.
I'm in a happy place.
I'm in a happy place.
I want to thank again Valerie. You know, Valerie, say something.
Say something, Valerie. Speak to us.
I love the concept. I saw Mother of Pearls had posted something And that's how I found out about you guys. And I thought, oh, I just love this concept. And so that's when I had messaged Megan, and I pre-ordered the book.
Mhm.
And just I love it. I love, because I'm one that's always trying to tinker with things, and I'm not as adventurous as Megan maybe. So I'm really excited that you're here. And I related to what you said, Alice, about your mom, because my mom taught us the backward loop cast on and the knit stitch. And then, because the backward loop cast on, it would be real narrow at the bottom, and it wouldn't, and it just drove me nuts. But yeah.
You got past it. You learned more. That's awesome.
Did.
Yeah.
I did.
Valerie is making beautiful sweaters. Yes.
Yes.
Sweaters and tops.
I'm on adventures. So,
Nice.
but I'm really looking forward to it. I love the book, and I'm really excited.
Thank you so much.
So I'm thrilled you guys came.
And I'm so very thankful for you too. Valerie, that you brought these two wonderful ladies into all of our lives. So thank you. Pat asked, do you have a favorite thing that you have ever knit? What is your favorite thing that you've ever knit? Hard question.
Oh yeah. A recent favorite is Pat. Recent favorite is I call it my Kern River sweater, and we went camping a while ago, and over it was 3 nights, 4 days. So as soon as we all buckled up and was backing out of the driveway, I cast it on, and I finished it as we pulled into the garage 3 nights, 4 days later. And it's a sweater, and it's a combination of my own hand dyed, hand spun yarn and some nice Rowan felted tweed that I have in my stash. And I love stripes. You can tell, Karen loves stripes. So it's a striped sweater. And even though Alice and we live in sunny California, we always run cold. So we like wool. We like hard-working wool. Yeah. Alice, what about you?
Yeah, I've been thinking. I think I'd have to say one of my most gratifying things that I've enjoyed knitting was a pattern of my own, of course, and it's a vest for children that I made several iterations of when my big girls are not that big, they're medium big, but when they were little, and I used Cascade 220 because these were things that were going to be worn to preschool and get paint on them and all that good stuff. And I had an approacher or whatever, how it is. It's I'm like, well, it's got to be a V-neck because our heads are kind of big. And it's it's got to have it's got to be a vest because then it's easy for a jacket, and then it's warm, but it's not too blah blah blah. Anyway, I knit a couple of those, and those went through the rotation of my eldest daughter, and then even got used by my younger daughter. And they were and they could go another round. They're fine, So those were really gratifying because they were so. I really like things that are really functional. I really prize functionality. You know what I mean? So when something really works like that, because they were, I just put them on, every single day when it was cold. So I guess I'd have to pick that for now. That was a win. Yeah.
Yeah. Data point is use per stitch.
Yes.
Where's per stitch? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Pat, I just want to say about my favorite sweater. Only way I could have gotten that sweater done, because it's a roomy, boxy, big sweater, is that I did not do line by line knitting. The pattern was all up here. So as long as I have my measuring tape and just plenty of yarn, you just fly. Yeah.
That's excellent. All right. Anybody else waiting for a pause to jump in with a question?
Shayna has her hand up.
Oh, go for it, Shayna.
Okay. Hey, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So one, I'm really super excited that you guys are on here that you, Valerie brought the book to our attention because I hadn't heard about it either. But I love the concepts and everything. And since I do some designing and stuff too, one of my thoughts initially, and I guess what my question is, and I don't know how much you can speak to it or how much you want to speak to it, but you know, for a lot of independent designers, yarn support's a huge thing. And so, and I haven't gotten my copy of the book to really look through yet. I'm waiting for mine to arrive. But how did yarn support work for the book if you don't call out specific yarns for people? And since there's no photos, because I know that that's a big part of why the photos are so prominent in our industry too, is that a lot of times the patterns are solely there just to sell yarn.
Mhm.
And so that was kind of one of the first things that popped into my head was like, how did that work with getting yarn support for the book? And I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. Yeah, I think I can take a swing at that one. We found the yarn, the people we reached out to, it, you know, like the designers, a very gratifying response. And you know, we were we tried to be upfront with them about the concept, and we did. And I don't know, Megan, if I could trouble you to open to one of the pages, the yarn talk pages. So at the end of each of those 4 issues that are in the book, we have a yarn talk page where we highlight. So when in the pattern itself, we don't say what yarn it is. We just describe kind of the properties of yarn that we went with and kind of said why, right? But then at the end of each issue, there's an example. Let's talk yarn. We highlight our yarn sponsors and we kind of fess up to the yarn we used. We're like, well, you know, you can kind of back into it and see like, oh, there's the yarn Rebecca used. There's the yarn Natalie used. So we do highlight them and, you know, do little drawings of them. And you know, celebrate them, but we just do it separate from the pattern. So that was kind of what we said. We said we're not going to do it in the pattern, but we are definitely going to have you on a page. Like we're definitely going to, you know, talk about you. And they were like, okay. And in some cases the designers also, you know, had a relationship with the yarn maker and, you know, chose that. So all in all, you know, yeah, beautiful materials. And I haven't heard any complaints yet. So hopefully that worked okay.
In our Instagram account recently, we have one of the yarn sponsors just, you know, commenting that she enjoyed participating and felt very proud that her, you know, yarn was being represented. Yumi or Shana, thank you so much for the question. I hope we answered it. Let us know.
Yeah, that was perfect because that was, like I said, since I don't have my copy of the book here yet, it was just kind of one of the things that was running around in my head where I'm like, I don't know how, like, because I know that usually yarn people are really excited to partner with designers and stuff. And, you know, it's a lot less scary reaching out to yarn people than I think some people realize. But I know, like, the whole concept of having a drawing only book, I was like, how did this work? So yeah, that was perfect. Thank you.
This is Mother of Pearl, which Valerie just mentioned. And then here's Adela, who we all know and love, Lola Bean Yarn.
Yes, Lola Bean, she commented on our Instagram, right?
Yeah. That's nice. Really nice. Yeah.
We love Adela. So yeah. Great question. That's a great question.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Pat. Hope you enjoy it.
Yes. Pat said that she didn't know that she wasn't sure if she wanted the book, but she knows that she does now. So yes,
so
thanks,
nice.
Pat.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'll give the last minute warning here on if folks have questions. Karen and Alice have been so very generous with their time, and again, just all of the thought that went into everything that you put into this book was kind of lurking beneath the surface for me. You know, it's like it's a comic strip book about knitting. What a neat little like concept, but like there's so much that went into the concept, and again, so cerebral in everything that you've kind of thought through. And then your friendship is just is so heartwarming as well. So I hope that you two continue to do what you're doing, and that a lot of people join you on your Knitstrips journey. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much for having us and hosting us. It's delightful to be here.
Thank you so much. It's been a privilege. Thank you, Valerie. I hope we made you proud.
Oh, I'm thrilled, and you were so much fun. I
Wow.
really enjoyed hearing everything that, you know, getting to know who you are and everything that went into this process. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fun for us too. Thank you.
You guys are larger than life. Like, again, really enjoy comic strip, Alice and Karen, but I prefer the in real life.
Awesome.
Well, you know, the friendship bracelets on the cover, that's the knitter. We're friends with you. That's our community. You know, we're your friends. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, I'm going to hit end stream over on YouTube. Thanks to everyone that joined us live, and this will be available for playback at any time. So if somebody wants to refer a friend, they can go out and hear Alice and Karen talk about their book at any point.
Awesome. Thank you.